Uh, this table doesn't look like much. It stays up on the top of our landing, our stairway outside of our bedroom door. And we put it there. We put a lamp on it and turn the lamp on. Now, with the time change in it, I have to turn the lamp on before I leave in the morning because when we get home, it's already dark. But it lights the top of the stairs, and it lights the landing there. And it's nice to come home and have some light in the house and that. And the significance of this table, though, isn't its role of what it does. The significance of this table is about a relationship. You see, for 7.5 years, I served as the student pastor or pastor of students at a church in northern Indiana, my hometown, actually. And I learned a lot there. Had a terrific experience there being mentored by a very good pastor and built a lot of deep relationships. Anybody who serves in student ministry realizes the value is really to build relationships with the moms and dads. And Vicki and I had a chance to do that. When it was time to leave and go to, come to here, we had a chance to say farewell. And honestly, the 7.5 years there was going to be put on display that last few days or weeks that I was there. Mike Breedlove had 2 children in the student ministry. Of course, by the time I left, they were already into college, and we had developed a bit of a relationship. Mike, in addition to running several businesses, finds broken down pieces of furniture, and he refinishes them. So what Mike did with this little occasional table was find it, repair it, clean it up, refinish it, and present it to me as a token of the relationship we had built in ministry over the years there. Farewells are a great time to take the measure of a relationship. Saying goodbye is a good way to judge, have I had an impact on the life of this person that I'm now going to be leaving behind in the rearview mirror at some level or another? Look at Acts chapter 20. Acts chapter 20 is a time of farewell. When we get to Acts chapter 20, the Apostle Paul has spent really years, about 10 years, on 3 different ministry journeys. He's traveled through what would today be Turkey and Eastern Europe. He's planted churches. He's built great relationships. He's appointed leaders. And by Acts chapter 20, he's finished with the 3rd and final journey he'll make in ministry. In fact, he's on his way with a group of other men to Jerusalem. He is going to be delivering a large amount of money that had been given by those churches that he had planted during the previous 10 years. And he's going to give that money to the Christians in Jerusalem who at that time were in recession. They were out of jobs, they were out of money, they didn't have enough food to eat, and this was one way to be able to gift them with the generosity of other Christians and churches from around the world. He's hurrying to get there by early summer, and so as he goes by, he doesn't have time to make a visit back to Ephesus. Ephesus is inland. It's going to take a while for him to get there. But he does go to the port city of Miletus. It's about 30 miles or about a day's journey away from Ephesus. He gets to Miletus, and he says, I spent 3 years in Ephesus. I love those people. I don't have time to stop and see them. And so he sends a messenger and says, hey, will you bring the elders, those entrusted with the care of that congregation, send them here to Miletus. I want to talk to them. It's a farewell. So we get to Acts chapter 20. We're going to look at verses 17 through 38 today. And we're going to discover some things that are true about healthy relationships. And so let me see if I can't lay out for us right here at the beginning what it is Acts chapter 20 is about. What is the theme of this message? And it's this: healthy churches have healthy relationships. Healthy churches have healthy relationships. As a matter of fact, we might say that healthy families have healthy relationships, and healthy businesses have healthy relationships. But the focus of this section is the relationships within churches. In particular, the application is to how do pastors, missionaries, those who have overall leadership direction in ministry, relate to elders who have the responsibility for care and direction in the church. And then by extension, how do those elders relate with the congregation? And so all of that's wrapped up in here in Acts 20. Let me begin reading in verse 17. The speech falls into 3 broad categories. The first part, just all the way through verse 34, Paul says, or through verse 27, you know me. As I've built a relationship over the years, I put my life on display. You know me. And then he turns a corner in verse 28 through 35, and he says, and I know you. I've observed this in our relationship. I recognize what it is, the value you bring to this relationship. And then at the end, verses 36 through 38, we see the payoff or the reward of healthy relationships, a deep love. We love each other. So let's begin by taking a look at Paul's statement that you know me, beginning in verse 17. Now from Miletus, Paul sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church to come to him. And when they came to him, he said to them, you yourselves know how I live. That's going to be a theme repeated over and over in these first couple of paragraphs. You know me. I was there. And he actually mentions three things that they knew about him. First of all, he says, I was honest. Look at verse 19. Serving the Lord with all humility, with tears, with trials that happened to me through the plots of the Jews. Healthy relationships are built on an honesty that says, you know what? You know me. You recognize some truths about me. I will let you into my life, the good as well as some of the bad. Let's talk about that from a church standpoint. It's important that you recognize that the pastors and elders of this church are real people, and they need to be honest enough to understand we are walking with the Lord and struggling in some ways just like you are. This is one of the reasons why our elders have made the determination, and I absolutely would agree with this, that we're not going to become a video venue. That is, we're not just going to go start other churches and show a video of me preaching. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just in our understanding, we think there's such great value, such high power in you knowing a little bit about the life of the man who stands before you and preaches. Paul says, I was there for 3 years. You know how I lived among you. And he said, I served the Lord. Listen, verse 19, humility and tears and trials. I'm a big-time preacher, right? Ooh, awful quiet. Well, at least they laughed at 9 o'clock. And so big-time preachers, we got our lives together, and we got our act together, and we get it right. And so I'm going on this last night talking about honesty. And last night we were going out to dinner and a concert after the service. And so I was kind of on a time crunch, and I thought, here's what I'll do. I'll wear my contact lenses so that I can go out, and I only need to have glasses, be able to read this stuff anyway. And so contacts in, ready to go, reading glasses firmly hooked on here, and I get in and I'm reading and I'm going through this, and then I get to this point in the message about honesty, and you know how I am, right? And so I've got my glasses in my right hand, and I kind of get on a roll, and I make this point, and what happens is these reading glasses sparkling in the light, boom, and they landed right there on that black, and there's that moment where as a pastor where you're like, well, big-time preacher, I got to just power through it, right? And so looked, and nobody's looking at me at this point. They're all like, and I looked up at them. I smiled. It's okay. I got it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And then I looked down at the next verse. Exactly. That's that. So look down at verse. Look down at verse. And so, not kidding you. Front row. First time he's ever been here. He came with some lady, a woman. I know the woman. But the first time. And he looks at me, and he looks at the glasses. I love it. He just gets up, slowly walked over, picked up the glasses. Now, at this point, I'm like, train is totally off the rails. And so what are you going to do? And I just leave, and he just, smart guy, just slowly. And then, yeah, bring him up here, grabbed him, put him back on. I'm like, oh, yeah, verse 25. Got that. And, right, people need to recognize healthy relationships are honest. I don't want you to know that I can't actually see this if I don't have my glasses on. So many people in their relationships, they do that, right? If you knew this about me, well, the reality is, if you're in a close relationship, they do. And healthy relationships are built on a sense of honesty. Give the gift to your spouse or to your child of making your relationship safe enough that they can be honest. I'm not talking about being ugly or mean or tolerating things that are harmful or destructive to the relationship, but Paul said, you know how I lived. I love that in our church there's a sense of genuineness. We don't excuse bad behavior, but we recognize, listen, people are really wrestling with things. Let's walk through that together. And healthy relationships have a level of honesty that says, you're going to see some things about this that could be difficult. I'm wrestling here, or maybe I'm failing here. And rather than accusation, there's the second thing he said they knew about him. Look at verse 20. How I did not shrink from declaring to you anything that was profitable and teaching you in public and from house to house. Verse 21, testifying to both Jews and Greeks of repentance toward God and of faith in our Lord Jesus Christ. You know what I see in here, verse 20? I did not shrink from declaring to you anything that was profitable. So that healthy relationships, there's honesty, listen, and also, you know me, I'm helpful. I'm helpful. He said, I'm going to say to you the honest truth, but I'm going to say that which is profitable, that which is helpful to you. That's so important. Now, let me just be real honest with you. Over the years of ministry, I have heard husbands say to their wives, they should never say to their dog. Or wives say things to their husbands that if they said it on their jobs, they'd be marched down to HR and perhaps security would be called. I don't know how it is that sometimes with those that are so close to us, we can let down our guard to the point of saying that which is very damaging. Paul said, I was there for 3 years. In fact, I was there during stressful times. You know how honest my life was. And during that time, what came out of my mouth for you was helpful. Can we say that? Dads and moms, what tenor do we set in the home with what comes out of our mouths about our children? Paul said, listen, 3 years. I didn't shrink. I didn't shy away. I said hard things. I said things that were also difficult. I declared, I proclaimed, I taught, but it was profitable for you. Man, if we can just practice in our relationships at home, turning down the heat and turning up the light. Try this on our jobs. Think about what's coming out of our mouths. He said, you know me, I was honest, helpful. Third, look at verses 22 through 24. And now, behold, I'm going to Jerusalem, constrained by the Spirit. So just recognize what he's saying he's doing, his next step. This is something the Spirit of God called him to do. He's not out of the will of God, he's in the will of God. And the Spirit called him or constrained him or drove him to do this, not knowing what will happen to me there. You ever been there? God's calling me to do something. I just don't know what's next. But I do know, verse 23, the Holy Spirit testifies to me in every city that imprisonment and afflictions await me. Wait a minute, let's see if I understand this right. The Spirit of God is leading him in an area of ministry that's going to result in harm and personal setback. And this is what the Spirit called him to do. Here's the word I would say. If I look at verse 24, I love this. I think this is one of the secrets to Paul's effectiveness in relationship. I do not account my life of any value, nor as precious to myself. Now listen, it doesn't mean he had a poor self-image. It means he had an accurate appraisal of the situation. So, for example, I don't count my life precious to me if only I may finish my course. What's so great about that turn of phrase, finishing my course, and has the idea of stretching out near the end of a race to break the tape. 15 years later, writing to Timothy, who was the pastor in Ephesus, in his final letter, in the final chapter of the final letter, he wrote these words about himself: I have finished my course. We call that commitment. Paul says, you know me. I was honest about my life. I was helpful in the way I approached you, and I am committed to this relationship, even when things are difficult, that I may finish my course, verse 24, and the ministry that I have received from the Lord Jesus to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. Let's take the direct application where it belongs, pastors and elders. Do our people know we're committed here? One of the great gifts a pastor and an elder gives to a church is saying, listen, we're in this together. I am not going anywhere, and we are going to face whatever the future holds. We're going to do that together. And elders that have that same sense of calling, that we may testify to the grace of God. There's the job. So let's broaden our application. Husband, wife. Do we recognize that being married is a great opportunity to testify to the grace of God? I've been doing marriage counseling long enough now, and I've been doing certainly meeting with premarital couples. Fortunately, we have so many young couples in our church. I get to do more and more of that these days that I really don't mess around too much with that. Introduction, first meeting. Hi, my name's Scott. Come on and sit down. Here's the word for you. Marriage is going to be hard. Right? If you've been married for a while, you ought to laugh at that. You know it's true. And if you, how many years? 60, how many years? 61 years. On Friday, 61 years. Yeah. So, great. Do you remember what you told me, Ed, when we celebrated your 60th there in Naperville at dinner? You remember what you told me? I asked, how'd you make it? You know what you said? You said, I don't hear very well. Exactly. I say, you want to have a good marriage, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot of work. And then I spend the rest of our time together saying, and let me tell you why it's worth it. See, it seems like in modern life, what we really want is the reward without putting the effort into it. I will tell you that commitment is what gets you to a healthy relationship. I will tell you there will be difficult, unexpected times ahead of you. Heartbreak, crushing disappointment. And what at the end of the day builds a foundation of a healthy relationship is an absolute commitment saying, even at times it causes me personal harm, I'm here. Parents, do our children know that? Do our kids get? You break our heart, we're not going anywhere. I'm not saying don't set boundaries. Parents, God help us if we don't set boundaries. That's devastating to a child. But we set boundaries within the context of a relationship and say, these are there because we love you, because we're committed to your good and your maturity and your blessing. I'm committed. So, question for us. Am I living for something larger than my ease and comfort? Do you realize having a happy marriage is an invalid reason to get married? Do you recognize the goal for the Christian is not let's have a happy marriage? The goal for the Christian is let's have a marriage that reflects the goodness and glory of Jesus Christ? Because I want to tell you something. There are times in your marriage it will not be happy. And there may be times in your marriage where it will not be good. And if our goal is only have a good or happy marriage, we may cast about like, well, maybe I'll find goodness or happiness in another relationship. Do I need to tell you how that's going to end? But if I say my goal in this marriage is that I love my wife as Christ loved the church, talk about commitment. Or my goal in a marriage, wife, is that I respond to my husband as Christ responds to the church. It elevates even the difficult times. Does my commitment to Jesus Christ trump my commitment to ease and comfort? Maybe I could phrase it this way as we broaden our thoughts to this idea of relationship. Do I understand my responsibility within this relationship? The whole emphasis, this first part of his speech, is not on what can you do for me, but you know me, you know the life I lived, you know what I brought to the relationship. Honesty, helpfulness, and commitment. The text takes a turn. Look at verse 28. Verse 28, he begins to focus and say, and I know you. 3 years we were together. I know what you need in relationship. I know how these relationships can be so tender. There are only two imperatives, that is, two commands to do something in this entire section. It's verse 28 and verse 31. The first one in 28 says this, pay careful attention. Because did I mention that good relationships take work? The second imperative is in verse 31. It's virtually the same. Therefore, be alert. If you wanted to really give it a punchy definition, it'd be like this. Wake up. So when it comes to relationships, you know me, and I know you. Relationships require that we give some attention to this thing. In fact, Paul mentions 3 areas where he was aware. He woke up to the relationship. Let me give you the first one. I know you, you're precious. Look at verse 28. Pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock of God, the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to care for the church of God. Let's just talk for a minute about pastors, elders, small group leaders, those who have spiritual responsibility. Recognize the awesome responsibility we have to care for, hear me, God's people, not mine. Do we recognize, those who have spiritual responsibility, the value of those people that we're caring for? Do we get that? In fact, it's one of those rare turns of phrase. The end of verse 28, the church of God, it's his, it's not ours, which he obtained with his own blood. Even the humblest saints struggling so deeply with failure in their life requires that pastors and elders see them as precious people for whom Christ died. That God's doing a work in their life. Don't miss that. But it's amazing to me if we expand the application to our marriages and our children and our co-workers and maybe the relationships within the church, how impatient we can get when we forget just how valuable that relationship is. When people do come to see me for marital counseling, so I'll save you the first session. We'll just go straight to the second one. Here's the first session. Tell me why you married this person. And I may have to ask some clarifying questions, but you know what almost always happens in the context of looking back and saying, oh yeah, we met this and we did that and we dated for this long, and then the tension begins to come down a little bit. Oh, I'm just not really, I'm not that profound, Rick. I'm not that profound of a guy. It's kind of like, hey, you chose to marry this person for a reason. Do we remember why? Parents, do we get how precious our children are? I know they drive us crazy. I totally get that. Not that mine ever have, but yeah, exactly, right. Well, you know my kids or something? And they are God's gift. Turn down the tension, turn down the heat, turn up the light. Before you have that conversation, before you instill that judgment or that punishment, or inflict that punishment, recognize what you're dealing with here. This is a precious relationship. I've already said, set the boundaries. I get that. But do that in the context of this is for your good. That's how God treats us. And I know you. You're precious. I kind of rephrase this. I paraphrased, if you may say, something like this. Give careful thought as to how to shepherd the people of God. Might be a great way to translate 28 through 31. And give careful thought about how to shepherd your spouse, husband or wife. Give careful thought about how to shepherd your child or those who work for you or your co-workers. Understand the preciousness of the relationship. Don't simply focus on the problem or the frustration. Second, as far as I know you, verses 29 through 32, and this is just so true in relationships. I know you, you're precious, and I know relationships, they're vulnerable. So he mentions 2 threats to relationship. Again, the context is within the setting of the local church. And verse 29, I know. Remember, it's I know you, I know. That's a repeated phrase. I know that after my departure, by the way, he was leaving that day. This is an immediacy to this. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you. From outside, they'll come in among you. They will not spare the flock. Fierce has to do with savage. merciless, pitiless. In every church, there's always the danger of people coming in from outside, and they have a separate agenda, and they're going to do harm. In particular here, I think he has reference to doctrinal error. Somebody comes in, they read it in a book, they saw it on TV, they're on whatever the Christian radio, and this is what's important for this church. And they begin to cause conflict, and they don't have the health of the church or God's precious people in mind. They want to get a following of themselves, and this is one of the great, Dr. Hoffmeyer, one of the great roles we have as elders is to ensure doctrinal integrity and health. And I love so much that our elders have this great sense of unity. Not unanimity. We have very honest give and take in conversation, but a great unity about protecting the people of God. And I have to say, Dr. Hoffmeyer, in your defense, he's probably the most pastoral of all the elders, including the pastor. He's always holding our feet to the fire. Yeah, well, how's this going to impact the people of God here? How are we caring for them? And that is such a great word for us. And relationships are vulnerable. External threats. Look at verse 30. There's an internal threat too. From among your own selves, to whom is he speaking? Elders, church leaders, those entrusted with spiritual care. Sometimes they get sideways too, and from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away disciples after them. Not necessarily false teaching, but they want to have division. You follow me. Loyalty not rather to Christ, but to themselves, and always a danger. And again, thank God for the unity we have as elders. And there's the issue of relationships being precious and being vulnerable. Look at verse 31. He reminds them, therefore, wake up! Elders, small group leaders, parents, husband and wife. Be aware of the threats to relationship. There can be those from outside that will insinuate themselves into a relationship to cause great damage. You better be aware of that email and text message and internet use. Wife, husband, parent. There are threats. Relationships are vulnerable. And beware of those on the inside that begin to bring chaos into a family or into a church. And someone in leadership needs to say, I care enough about the health of this family to deal with that. And that's what he's saying to them. And be careful, be alert. Verse 32 says the third thing about relationships. They're precious, they're vulnerable. And he says, you know what, here's something else I know about you. You're capable. I trust you. So, and now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace. The word of his grace is a reference to the gospel that saved them. It's the gospel that's going to grow them. Listen, the word commend, we think today of like, well done, I commend you. It's not what it means here. It means to deposit, to put on deposit. Let me illustrate it. 2008, on my wife's birthday, we were to close on the house we sold in Glen Ellen so we could move out here closer by the church. And we did close on the house in Glen Ellen. The problem is we couldn't close on the house we bought in West Chicago. There's some sort of a problem with the bank. I don't know, it was Friday night at 5. And so guess what? We're a family without a home. So we spent a few days up here at the Holiday Inn Express. And I don't think the elders knew this at the time, but my dog and our 2 cats were in my office there while we... I'm just, if I confess publicly, I figured who's going to yell at me, right? And so, but you know what I had? I had this check from the closing on the sale of the house. Not huge, but it's like bigger than I normally get. All weekend long, I'm on pins and needles. I'm so nervous. Do you know what I needed to do? I need to get rid of that check and deposit it. This is the down payment for the next house. And pastors and elders, do we trust our people enough to say, God's got this? I can't fix your problem, but I can go to the God who can. See, pastors and elders and effective ministry leaders at some level get it very deeply. These are God's people, and I trust him to do what's best. That's harder when it's my spouse or a child. And we come up face to face with the truth that I cannot change them. And so we turn Jesus Christ loose on them. We, by an act of the will, often by a prayer of dedication, say, I commend you to God. I cannot fix this. If it's a child, I may not be there. They may choose to move on. But I trust that you are capable. I believe God is going to do something in your life that is surpassing what I can do. And I'll be honest with you, you don't get through dark times in a relationship unless you have that kind of a sense of trust. God is capable in His time to handle that which I cannot handle. So the second question, the first was, do I understand my responsibility in this relationship? Do I know what it is I should be bringing to the relationship? Paul said I was honest. Paul said I said and did that which was helpful. Paul said I'm committed. Do I understand what my responsibility is? Second question would be this. Do I add value to this relationship? Don't answer too quickly. Is the relationship better because of what I bring? We just need to be honest about our own impact. This is why this table means more to me than just carrying a lamp. This is a symbol that for whatever reason and in whatever way I brought some value to a relationship years and years ago. It's been 20 years we've been gone. What would the folks closest to us in relationship, what would our folks say is the value we bring to relationship? So because I'm so committed to application and not just leaving you say, well, that was a good message. Now what do I do? Let me give you a third question and we'll answer it. Will they miss me when I'm gone? Will they miss me when I'm gone? Look at verses 36 through 38. When he had said these things, he knelt down and prayed with them all. And there was much weeping on the part of all. They embraced Paul and kissed him. Praying, weeping, hugging, kissing. This sounds like making up after a fight, right? Somehow in 3 years, the Apostle Paul had made such a deep impact on people that they said, we're going to miss you. So, how can I pour into the relationships, especially those that are important and precious to me? How can I pour into them in such a way that they miss me when I'm gone? And I had really well thought out, Terry, really well thought out phrases for you to remember. And then I realized I'm talking to a lot of men here, and you actually won't write it down, nor will you remember it. Now, Terry actually does write it down, but most guys don't write it, and they don't remember it. So in the spirit of, you know what the KISS principle is? Keep it simple, saints. I dispense with the actual verbal points, and I'm going to give you pictures. So all the guys, you're good with the pictures? Yeah? Good. All right, good. Thank you. So first thing, how can I add value to a relationship? First, and it's two don'ts, and then the last one is a do. Don't be a porcupine. Okay? It's like, where's this guy going with this? Well, stick with me here, bros. Listen carefully. Be thoughtful about this. In order to protect themselves from hurt, porcupines get prickly and drive threats away. Some of you learn to deal with relationships by when you feel a threat getting prickly. Just got to be real honest with you. You're going to have to risk hurt and heartbreak if you want to have a healthy relationship. You cannot fully insulate yourself and have a healthy relationship. Do you remember the very first words out of Paul's mouth? You knew me and my tears and my hurt. I realize this can be done as a defense against past hurt, and I would say to you again, you're going to have to develop a deep enough level of trust to say, I am willing to brace hurt or to face hurt because it is miserable to be a porcupine. Second thing I would say to us, don't be a pig. Yeah, it seems like we get this one. If porcupines are prickly out of self-preservation, pigs are piggish because they're just blindly selfish. Some of you are married to a pig, and I am very sorry for you. That is very hard. If you are the pig, wake up. Pigs mostly look at the world like, what can you do for me? How do I get more and more comfortable and get just as fat emotionally as I can possibly get? That's hard. If you had a pig for a parent, I'm sorry for that. But you better let that go and grow up into maturity and be selfless. And if you're a child who's a pig, thank God in heaven if your parents drive the piggishness out of you. I know I'm being strong, but I'm telling you, I have seen so many relationships revolve around pigs that are destructive. Third, so if I give you two do nots, how about if we give you a do? Do be a puppy. Now that's what I was counting on right there. As I'm working through this whole thing, I am counting on you when you see a puppy going. And let me illustrate what I mean by that, because some of you think, you mean I should be soft and cuddly all the time? No, that's not what I mean. Puppies bring into relationship, or dogs, but puppies in particular, bring into relationship such an abandoned love for their owners. So the last 10 days or so, our daughter was babysitting a pup. Not our pup, not our responsibility, it's hers. And so this was a 7-month-old pup, very headstrong and very cute. And so she brought him into the home. We like our home to be neat and clean, and so she brought him into the home. He was very excited to see us and got so excited he immediately made a deposit on the floor. And I was not happy about that, and so I addressed the puppy in a non-fatherly way. And then the puppy looked up at me with those eyes, and I went, I made her clean up the mess, and so Vicki and I walked the dog down, all the way down our street. The dogs, I mean, all the way back so that the dog would do his business where dogs ought to do their business, in the neighbor's yard. And so we're not that kind of people. But anyway, and so we bring the dog back home. We bring him back into the home. He's so happy to see us that yes, he does, right? Again. And again, I'm not happy. And we went away for a few hours. A couple of days later, we get back, and we thought we're being so smart. We'll put him in the downstairs bathroom, which is small, and we thought we puppy-proofed it, and we come back a few hours later, and you smell it before you see it, and you open the door, and you're like, oh, this dog loves toilet paper. It's a mess everywhere, and the dog's looking at you. He's so happy. It's like it's the whole end, and you look at him, and you go, oh, yeah. Right? And then I walk him while they clean up. And be the kind of person in a relationship where we recognize there are going to be messes and disappointments and oops, but there's such a deep level of love and trust that after all of the frustration and I have to clean up all the messes, we can say, you know what, I love you, and when I look at you, I just think, let's pray. Father, funny way to end the message, but there's some folks here I know that have heavy hearts. Some have been hurt, and so they're just going to be safe. Some have hurt others and have just decided, you know what, it's not worth being in a relationship. Lord, I pray that there would be a willingness to re-engage those who are nearest and dearest to us. There would be an accounting for what we can bring to the relationship. There would be appropriate boundaries, knowing the value, the preciousness, and vulnerability of relationships. And most of all, Lord, there would be the hard work of building better relationships. God, I can't help but close this prayer by recognizing that it was about the grace of Jesus Christ. That was the foundation of their relationship. So I pray for men or women here, maybe young men, young boys, young girls, young women who do not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Father, I'm not talking about their confirmation or their baptism or their first communion. I'm talking about knowing that Jesus Christ died and rose again for our sins. I'm not talking about faith in a church or an institution, but faith in a Savior who offers an intimate relationship. God, I pray that they would repent of their sin and would believe Jesus Christ who died and rose again. And Father, I pray especially your grace, your hope, your power to sustain those in difficult relationships, that we would never lose hope and trust that one day you'll make things right. Thank you, and we ask this in Jesus' name.